Radio Flange Goblin.
Oh, I don't know what just happened there, but I appear to be sitting on a sponge and wearing long twirly tit attachments. Never mind, I shall press on. I'm a professional. I have teeth and hair and a face. Well, I have a face. Anyway, you're listening to Radio Flange Goblet, and as you know, the COVID-19 pandemic hit us pretty hard here at the station. We lost the Gerald Thimp touches otters moment, 3 out of the 5 Barnaby Crutch sisters, the program we used to broadcast where small native Peruvians hit each other with large flaps of alpaca skin, while Robert Goulet sung sporting anthems and roasted a chicken. Ernie Plimsoll's hat, a serious dissection on the very real issue of hat arousal. Lermy Bumpkin's pulsating thoughts, some audience members from Screbby Gelb's limping cardinal hammering side piece, and we thought, nay prayed, that we had lost the after-movie diner because they hadn't shown up lately, and we had all started taking bribes to see who was going to get their leatherette talking trousers and oversized wobbly eggs. But they came in today with several rolls of tape under their arms, a picture of an inflamed Princess Anne, which they nailed to the studio wall with a Bowie knife, and a tray of month-old sandwiches, which they claimed to have stolen off the table at a church fete they crashed while having a particularly bad come-down from some amphibians they'd been licking round the back of Digbeth coach station. So, without further phlegm expulsion from me, here is whatever they've cobbled together in between their routine jelly-bathing, fistfights, and loud demands to have their nipples flayed.
You're listening to the sweet sounds of the After Movie Diner. Support us at patreon.com/After Movie Diner. Or I'll punch you in the teats. Rate and review us on iTunes, Earthling. And now, here's your host, John Cross.
That's right, I am John Cross, and this is a message about what you're about to listen to. So, we have not released a podcast in about a month, maybe slightly over a month, but that doesn't mean we hadn't recorded some. We had recorded a couple, actually, and what I kind of did was I sort of slammed those 2 podcasts together. I kind of took some of the fun bits out of the first one and some of the movie chat from the second one and put them together. However, during the second one, the internet kept crapping out. So you'll hear that at a certain point, the audio changes a bit because Jim swaps over to a phone. Then he swaps back to regular mics. Then I get frustrated. Then there'll be gaps and all sorts of things. So I've done my best. Listen, I've done my best. I have been in the sort of mood where I haven't necessarily wanted to edit or podcast or even watch movies. And it's been a weird thing. I moved to the countryside and I wanted to enjoy the countryside, and a lot of my kind of movie desires and podcasting desires they weren't kicking in. The motivation wasn't happening. I was enjoying just being outside and being amongst nature and finding my peace, as it were. Also, I had been doing a lot of music in 2020 and early 2021. And the music bug was still sort of there in the ether. I think creative people will understand what I mean, that your motivations and your impulses go up and down and in and out and all over the shop. And sometimes you're in the mood and sometimes you're not. And I've not been in the mood. And even though we've tried to record a couple of episodes, which you're going to hear the amalgam of coming up, I just haven't been in the mood. However, happy to report that more in the mood now as I'm editing this, and hopefully there will be new episodes of the After Movie Diner coming soon. Also, check out our social medias because we have good news and we have bad news. We do have bad news. So I'm sorry, we do have bad news, but I will leave that to the next episode or our social media platforms. If you follow us on Instagram or Twitter, you might be finding out the bad news before the next episode drops. But there will be another episode, so you will hear the news then. Anyway, I'm going to leave that teaser because let's get on with this episode. It's fun. It's enjoyable. It was recorded a couple of times over the last month or so, and I've slammed it together and tried to make a coherent episode out of it. You be the judge of how I did, and I don't really care. It just is what it is. But anyway, enjoy this episode and look forward to all new episodes coming soon. Hello and welcome to another episode of the After Movie Diner. I'm here with our regular co-host and wonderful bum face. It is Mr. Jim Wallace. How are you doing this week, sir?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm eating, so sorry about that. But then that's very on brand for the diner. We haven't done that for a while.
Well,
I usually do try and order something from a diner.
Yeah.
So, you know, to get that vibe.
I feel like that if we don't at least have one episode every 10 episodes that involves your chewing, that the listeners just aren't happy. No, I feel like they need it. They require it.
They don't want me to phone it in.
No.
You know what I mean?
They don't want you to phone in the chewing. They want you to get right deep next to the microphone and chew that chicken burger with all strength, my friend.
Yes.
Yes. So I also feel that the gauntlet for these many weeks has been thrown down, that we have some form of shed-based content at the front of the show. So it has to be. So a while ago, about a week and a half ago, I found Andrew Wilcox, I Love Sheds, or at Uncle Wilco on Facebook. So not on Facebook, sorry, on Twitter. I found Andrew Wilcox, I Love Sheds, or at Uncle Wilco on Twitter. And he was posting all about Shed of the Year. And it's returning for the 15th year. He is the
15 years.
Yeah, he is the curator and writer of shedblog.co.uk.
Wow.
And in Shed News, in February, this is going back obviously to February now, but Shed of the Year returns for the 15th year. And I posted that I think the After Movie Diner, mainly about sheds in parentheses, I think that the After Movie Diner needs to sponsor the Shed of the Year somehow. That's what I said, right?
Right.
To which Andrew Wilcox, I Love Sheds, at Uncle Wilco on Twitter, said, "That's very kind of you, but we love having Cuprinol sponsoring us."
Well, that's a proper shed-related company.
Shed-related company, yes. He said...
Not a bored hippie in Connecticut.
Right. Maybe you can... He then says, maybe you can buy us some popcorn, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. He's like, well, you can't sponsor us. Maybe you can buy us some popcorn. Like,
he was making a movie diner joke, wasn't he? Isn't one of your, like... I would think that would be what it is.
Yeah, no, I'm sure, but it's like a bad runner-up.
Do I have to explain his jokes to you?
No, it's not that. I'm saying
you got so old. You like my gran now. I have to explain what jokes are.
No, I understand the jokes.
I think he was joking because you're a movie blog.
Yes,
and movies have popcorn.
Yes, no, I understand what he was saying, but I'm saying it's a shitty runner-up prize to say, hey, I'm willing to sponsor your Shed of the Year show, and you go, just get me some popcorn.
It depends if he mentions you on the show. Like,
true.
Very kindly, the After Movie Diner has sent us some popcorn.
He
got a shout out. More we don't know.
No.
The potential crossover audience here is huge.
It's huge. Well, wait.
If he's sponsored by Cuprinol, he's a proper...
Just wait. Because the crossover is huge. Just wait where the conversation goes.
Okay.
So he said, however, we do have a shed load of sheddies who love their films, or movies as you call them, and turn their sheds into cinemas or theatres. I think he thinks I'm American because he's kind of translating everything from British to American.
Well, you are based in America, so you can see how he
no, totally. I wasn't
leap to that conclusion.
To which I responded, because I looked up, he posted a link to readersheds.co.uk, and I was looking through it, and I said, also one ingenious sheddist turned theirs into a diner, because there's all these sheds that have been turned into different things. Some are cinemas, some are diners.
Okay, this is already like one of the greatest Twitter conversations possibly ever.
And I said, we are a movie podcast who's found that a lot of their listeners like to listen in their shed. So sheds have become a theme of late. As of now, neither host has a shed, but that may change. And I posted a link to the Lancashire Diner, which is one of the sheds that has been turned. It's in Lancashire, but they call it Yankeeshire because it's a diner.
I get it.
It's American in Lancashire.
I like it. Yeah.
Right? And he said, yes, there's been quite a few diners over the past 15 years. And I said, I'm fascinated by and in love with the shed of the year. I've become an avid follower. Now I can't wait to get my own shed one day. And he said, we love to welcome new sheddies and people who want to become sheddies to our fold. And he said, we call our followers shed lovers sheddies, not shedists, by the way. Not that it's weird looking at sheds all day. So I'm already being schooled by the shed community.
Yeah, as you should be. You're going to join it.
Yeah, I just said like one ingenious shedist. Like I just made the word. I mean, sheddy or shedist. It's like the whole trekker or trekkie thing. You know, some people want to be trekkers because they want to be like, well, you know, I'm a trekkie, but I'm like a cool one, so I'm a trekker. Like I could take or leave trek. You know what I mean? But real trekkies are like, no, fuck it, I'm a trekkie and I own being a trekkie. This is nothing like that. This is some bearded goit who doesn't know the lingo saying the word shedist, and the guy who does know the lingo going, we're sheddies actually, but thank you for trying. He's very lovely, Andrew Wilcox, lovely guy.
You've unmasked yourself as a dabbler. You've unmasked yourself as a dabbler in sheds.
Yeah.
And not a lover of sheds. You're a dabbler.
Yeah. And my friend Stu, who is in Beijing, China, and I do not think has a shed either, although I don't know. He might well have a Beijing shed. I don't know. He says, I have followed and I am too a newbie to the shed world. And Andrew says, welcome as well. We are mainly UK sheds, but we have a lot of international ones. But the British shed is pretty unique as they are mostly small, but the rest of the world is catching up in terms of modern shedism. And I want to let everyone know that my new home in Connecticut is nary a cough and a trip from a shed selling place called The Barn Yard, and they sell little sheds that are they look like barns or whatever, but they're little sheds that you buy them like built and you take them home or whatever. And so yeah, I live near a shed selling place now.
Are you going to buy one?
I can't buy one at this property because it's a rental property, and I think it would be rather weird to say to our landlords, by the way, I've just bought a shed. I think that would be, they'd probably be like, why, how long are you staying if you just bought a shed? But in our new property, wherever that may be, I will most definitely be getting a shed. I am all over sheds right now. Shed of the year is my thing. I'm very happy about it. You should see some of these diner sheds and movie theatre sheds. I mean, they are just fantastic. So I urge all of our listeners who are either shed-based or fans of the shed.
Or shed-adjacent. To follow Andrew Wilcox, I Love Sheds. Even if you've only ever found yourself occasionally wistfully looking at a shed.
Yeah, listen.
That qualifies.
It more than qualifies. I think the wistful staring at a shed is a beautiful pastime and one should do it. So I changed, after this conversation, I changed our profile to the After Movie Diner, and then in parentheses, mostly about sheds, to which it caused Andrew Wilcox to private message me. He said, nice profile change. He said, I've been meaning to start doing a podcast about sheds for years, and even got the domain shedpod.co.uk and @shedpod, but can't seem to get motivated. And I said, you should do that. Would be excellent. I could help point you in the right direction if needed. There seems to be lots of podcasts about people who write in their shed. So if you look up like shed podcasts, there's lots of podcasts of people who are like, hey, I podcast from my shed, or I write in my shed, or I watch movies in my shed. But there's not a lot of podcasts, none that I could find.
About sheds.
Then I told him all about the listener in Edinburgh who sends us an email about his shed, and it springboarded this whole shed conversation. And I did a whole range of podcast merch with phrases on it like, I listened to the After Movie Diner podcast in my shed, and if only this was a podcast about sheds. And then he said, I only found you as I starred the shed column in TweetDeck. Oh, he probably has a column in TweetDeck that is just looking for anyone who mentions the word shed.
He said, he shed. What a slip of the tongue. What a wonderful.
He shed. I know what it's like to be shed.
He said, and one of your listeners was tweeting about it, so I looked at the thread. And then he said, thanks, I will pick your brains if I make a decision. I know a lot of shed people, so it would be about the sheds and them. And I'm saying, Andrew Wilcox, if you listen to this episode...
if he does, he's going to get a rude awakening as to what we're about. We're about to plumb the moral depths of humanity.
Yes, we are. But I just want to say, Andrew Wilcox, we love you and your shed-based blogging activity. Hurrah to the 15 years of Shed of the Year. And even if we aren't an official sponsor, we love it and are telling every one of our listeners, all one of our listeners, to go over to the Shed of the Year show, which can be found on shedblog.co.uk. So shedblog, hashtag Shed of the Year.
And not shedblog.co.
No, shedblog.
Not shedblog.co and then like pause.
No, shedblog.co.uk. Don't confuse people. This is shed news. This is important. There's Shed of the Year. There's the Shed Shop. You can go to the Shed Shop and buy a shed from these popular UK shed companies. So they have all the shed companies included. There's even a New Zealand shed if you are a well-known sheddy from New Zealand, to get the vernacular correct, Jim. They are sheddies.
Okay. So is it like a bowl of... So is a collective noun of a group of shed enthusiasts a bowl of sheddies?
I don't know. I will have to ask a keeper of Shed Blog, Andrew Wilcox, I Love Sheds, also known as Uncle Wilkie on
I think
Twitter.
It should be a bowl of sheddies. That's what I think.
Well, there we go. That is our shed-based related content.
That's all for this week's Shed Talk.
Yeah, Shed Talk.
Thanks for joining us.
Yes, indeed. We are 25% vaccinated because there are two of us. I am 50% vaccinated. Jim is not yet vaccinated. So the whole podcast is 25% vaccinated, which is very exciting.
I don't like our odds.
No.
I don't like our odds of surviving to the end of the podcast.
But it's very exciting.
At least, at the very least, with our dignity intact.
With our dignity intact. Well, I don't know about you, but if I ever had dignity, if that was ever a thing that a cross possessed, and I'm not sure it was, but if I ever did have dignity, then it has long since oozed out of me.
I think I saw you lose it one September afternoon in that sandy playground at Amesbury. I seem to remember.
That's probably when I left.
You looking around, a bit lost.
At the age of 6 or 7 or whatever it was.
That was it. What was that? That was your dignity, mate.
That was it. It scooted off. What it did was it oozed out of me like a bad B-movie alien slug and scurried away, all rubberized and gelatin, off into the bushes, where it probably got my dignity, my slithery B-movie alien slug dignity, probably got humped by a squirrel or something.
No more than your dignity deserves, mate, being humped by a squirrel.
Yeah. So that's what happened, and that's when my dignity left me. How are you, sir? How are you doing?
I'm all right. A bit knackered, but I've got a week off next week, which I'm really looking forward to. We've taken to watching movies in installments. So last week we watched US Marshals in 4 installments.
Oh,
and this week we've been watching the Peter Jackson King Kong in, I think we had the third installment? No, second installment. So 3 installments of the Peter Jackson King Kong. It's quite fun.
Is it, or is that problematic? I feel like a movie. Well, because I feel like a movie in its essence, especially a cinematic movie, but any movie, it should be lights off and focus on the screen as if one was at a play or whatever, and you watch the whole thing.
Normally, I would agree with you.
Play out. I mean,
when
Peter
you're
Jackson's
unwinding
King
from a long
Kong
day.
is 17 hours long, so...
Yeah, well, that's why it helps. And when we were watching the extended cut, because we so it's just very cruel. This is long time ago when, and we didn't have a lot of money, and we I don't think we had Netflix, and so we would get stuff from the library and from thrift stores, and they had like the Peter Jackson extended edition King Kong on DVD, like 2-disc edition. So okay, great. Just one movie, just 2 interviews of Peter Jackson about how you make a monkey look realistic or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And they had just one, but who gives a shit? So we get in, and we watch it. We go, oh, it's really good. There's lots of extra scenes, extra dinosaurs, like what's not to like? And then at a certain point in the movie, screen goes black. He goes, please insert disc 2. You go, what? The movie's so long you had to put it on 2 DVDs? I've never even heard of that. So... we didn't have disc 2, so we'd spent however much, I don't know, it was only like a few dollars or whatever, but bought and forever doomed to never know how the extended edition, played out. We would, and here we are, many years later, living that dream. Suddenly, financially afloat enough to blow $12 on Amazon to buy the movie.
I love the.
So there you go.
I love the secular nature of that story. I love that it had a happy ending.
Right.
And but I can only imagine the frustration of sitting through 90 minutes or 2 hours or whatever of the extended edition of King Kong, only for a thing to come up that says insert disc 2, and you're like, I can just picture you in a very Jimsy way. Be like, I don't have bloody disc 2.
That may have happened, yeah.
I can just imagine that.
There may have been
and
a small shaking of my fist at the sky.
Yeah, I would be absolutely... I wouldn't be able to shake that because I would feel like I had lost a limb or something. Like I would walk around with like people who lose limbs have like phantom limbs. I would have like phantom second half of movie syndrome.
Well, I think I was still smoking at that point, so that made it easier.
Yeah, you just went outside and had a couple of cigarettes.
Went outside and smoked a cigarette. Yeah, had a rage fag.
So, I as a follow up then, considering me and Mrs., I've been catching Kim up on the current Monsters universe or whatever they're calling it. King Kong, Skull Island, and Godzilla King of the Monsters. In order for us to watch Kong versus Godzilla, which we haven't watched yet before it goes off HBO, because it goes off HBO at the end of April. So we've been watching those movies. And first of all, have you seen any of those movies? I think you've seen the first Godzilla for certain, right?
I saw the first Godzilla. That I saw.
And didn't we see Godzilla King of the Monsters? You and me.
We saw Godzilla. We covered it on the podcast. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen all of them except the new one. Godzilla I saw with jet lag, and I fell asleep during the incredibly climactic final fight.
Right.
But then me and Teresa, when we were down in Florida, and the place was saying, they had that private cinema. So I bought Godzilla specifically to watch in that private cinema, and it was amazing. I don't care what people say about that movie. I really, really like Godzilla.
Me too.
King Kong Skull Island, I was a bit disappointed. It was okay, but I find Hiddleston and what's her face.
The casting in. Now I don't want to spend too long on this, but like, I rewatched them recently, and I like all 3 movies, but the human characters and the plot and the script for the human people is all rubbish. And the casting of Hiddleston and Captain Marvel lady, Brie Larson, it's just badly cast. It's just really badly cast. It's so badly cast that Hiddleston takes me out of the whole fact that it's meant to be set at the end of the 60s, early 70s. Because he's got like modern highlights and there's no attempt to make him look remotely like the 70s. At least with her, they've given her that sort of, 70s Farrah Fawcett hair or whatever, and her clothes are period enough that you kind of go, okay. But he's just wearing like a tight t-shirt and a pair of jeans. Like he could have walked out of a Gap ad. So it not only does that throw me off, but it also throws me off the fact that they're, it's all set up with John Goodman and his fella going to find Hiddleston because he's the one tracker who can take them through the jungle. And they go find him in some bar in Asia somewhere. And you're like, Hiddleston doesn't look like some sort of war-torn, 5-day stubble, alcoholic, once was a great tracker guy. He looks like a guy in a Gap ad with blonde highlights and a tight t-shirt. I'm like, get rid of that. Like, they needed Ray Winston or someone who could do grizzled and someone who looked like he'd been in a fight.
I would so have preferred. I mean, I don't know that it would have been a hit at the box office necessarily, and that might be, in hindsight, attributable directly to the casting of Ray Winston as the heartthrob male lead. But I definitely would have enjoyed the shit out of that. Okay,
well, even if you want, like, I know people would be like, well, no, he doesn't belong in this movie. But even if it's someone like Statham, someone who could do relatively grizzled. Like, all you need to be is relatively grizzled. And I'm sorry, Hiddleston, whether he's in the middle of the jungle helping Kong out, or whether he's, swanning about the Avengers private jet or whatever, he just looks like someone who should have a monocle at a cocktail party and be discussing evil and war or something. He just doesn't look like a grizzled British soldier at all. I just don't believe it for a second. So he stinks up the joint. But the thing that I've realised, the thing that I have come to love and embrace about these movies, and especially on second watch, is that it is very, 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 very obvious that where the focus, concern, and effort has been placed is entirely on the monsters and the monster fighting. Because, and also in King Kong, the Kong Skull Island, the shots, like the director has some clear idea about how he wants to shoot like Kong and then Kong fighting stuff. The sequence with Kong fighting the Kraken octopus thing looks straight off the front cover of like an old pulp magazine, like an old monster pulp magazine. And the sequences in Godzilla King of the Monsters, with all the different monsters coming out of like the storms and in the water and like with slithery tentacles and big wings, and it's all done so beautifully and so well, but it's done in this perfect way where it's a cross between modern beautiful filmmaking with big widescreen lenses and booming sounds and well rendered monsters, coupled with a real desire to recreate the B movie and pulp feel that monster stories need to have. And for that, I genuinely applaud that trilogy.
Fair enough, mate.
That's how I felt about it. So I will report back on Kong versus Godzilla because I haven't seen it yet. But when I do, I'll report back on it.
All right. So, speaking of grizzled, and B movies.
Speaking of grizzled B
movies,
discuss
tonight's movie
and things fighting other things.
Right.
Let us discuss Willy's Wonderland. And I also want to point out that this is a perfect follow-up to The Breach.
It is, right?
In the sense, and
I was even thinking we could call it Cage It Be Good or Willis Be Bad?
Yeah, okay.
Just a thought.
Yes.
Just a thought.
No, the reason why it's a good follow-up to Breach is that in the Breach episode, which just went up, the conversation goes to, why is Bruce Willis doing movies like this? And was this the lowest budget movie that we've ever seen? And what could he have done to improve it? And yada, yada, yada. There was a lot of conversation about that. And and there's a lot of these actors who were once, big stars who if they want to maintain, if they don't want to go on and play, dads or principals of high schools or, mentors or whatever, if they want to continue being leading men, their only option is to, run to their VOD or B-movie hills and find someone who's just excited to have them in their movie. And there's a few of them. We've talked about Cusack doing it. We've talked about Willis doing it. We're going to talk about Cage tonight. And the Cage phenomenon versus the Willis phenomenon is a good counterpoint. And this is saying nothing about the movie Willy's Wonderland, which we can get into. But in terms of just the Cage scenario and how Cage has navigated leading man in the B world versus how Willis has navigated it, I think there is an interesting counterpoint discussion to be had, and that's what I'm most excited about. But first off the bat, tell everyone about Willy's Wonderland, and then follow it up with your initial thoughts on the film, sir. I give the room to you.
All right, so the plot of Willy's Wonderland is Nic Cage, promotional consideration furnished by Chevy, drives up to a town, gets a flat tire. While the guy's repairing the flat tire, he's told.
Well, he gets a flat tire on one of those spiky things that the police.
All right, we could do the thing where you interrupt me with needless detail.
Well, it's not needless detail. That's important.
No, because I'm getting to it later. You're making out like I've forgotten something important.
Okay.
But it's folded into the general way in which I'm choosing to develop the narrative. I'm just saying,
for people who haven't watched the movie, if you just go, well, he gets a flat tire and someone's fixing it.
Yeah, but what if I reveal what happened later at a more dramatically interesting point? Do you know what I mean? This is all about how you choose, right?
Okay.
To unpack the information.
Okay.
So he gets a flat tire. He gets taken to a garage. In the garage, he's told, "I can repair it, but you got to pay for it. By the way, we only take cash." Cage has got no cash, and he got a credit card, and the ATM machine is broken because there's no internet in the town. He says, "Don't worry," says the bloke. "If you're prepared to do a little bit of work, you can work it off in one night. I'll bring the car the next morning and you can be on your way." Cage agrees. So they go to this place, which looks to be like a sort of a Chuck E. Cheese kind of an affair, right? It's like a family restaurant. They're kind of specialized in kids' birthday parties. And the gimmick is there's like animatronic figures. There's like a weasel, a crocodile, a gorilla.
People have compared it to the computer game Five Nights at Freddy's, which I am not aware of that computer game, but apparently it is a popular computer game where people do battle with animatronic animals at a Chuck E.
Well, can we get to that back? Again, you're ruining the narrative here. You're jumping in with your plot revelations earlier. I'm gently unfolding the tablecloth.
Anyone who's seen the poster and the trailer knows
narrative
knows
right?
what happens. But all right, carefully.
And that in itself,
while
right,
chewing your salad
description,
and arguing with me, carefully unveil the plot of Willy's Wonderland.
I'm just saying, any description, any telling of the story, right, is in its own way a work of art, right?
Well, I
am telling a story. Yeah. That in itself is an art, right?
Right.
And at the moment, you are being Jeff Lynne to my
George Harrison
brainwashed.
Right.
Right.
No one really gets that reference, but okay, yes. Because only you and me ever listen to that album. But carry on, yes.
This place that Cage has to spend the night cleaning. Yeah, looks to be a kind of a kids' restaurant, animatronic figures. However, there's also like signs on the outside of the building that's like gateway to hell and child killer. And earlier, a teenage girl looked like she was trying to burn the place down. So the place is surrounded by a menace. And you come to find out that, in fact, the animatronic figures are alive. And basically the film is Nic Cage doing battle with these animatronic figures in the restaurant that he's been locked into. And that's the movie.
So where was the carefully...
that was it, mate.
Carefully weaving in of important plot points.
Oh, yeah, shit, right. I suppose we would get to that later, but...
Yeah, no, we'll get to it later. It's fine. So, I mean, there's a little more than that.
It transpires basically that he's not there by accident, is the point.
Right, it transpires that he's not there by accident.
But what did you think? Honestly, what did you think?
Hang on.
Okay.
Hang on. I'm sorry. I can't do battle with you on everything. I'm so tired already. It's like a constant combat. First of all, Nic Cage doesn't say a word in the whole movie. Secondly, Nic Cage seems to have an obsession with a what do they call them? Energy drinks, like a fruit-based energy soda called Punch. That he, during his cleaning time in the Willy's Wonderland, he has his watch set to allow certain breaks. We never know how long they are, but certain breaks.
About an hour, I would say. It seems like about an hour.
Yeah, yes. But in each of those breaks, I mean, no, because he takes 7 or 8 breaks. If they were an hour long each, that would be longer than the night is. So.
Well, no, he's there like when the sun goes down. It's on the sun comes up. I think 7 or 8 hours is about right.
I don't think he takes 8 hours worth of breaks, dude. I think the breaks are like long enough.
He takes 8 hours break, but he takes a break every hour, which means 8 breaks. He's there all night, which will be about 8 hours.
Yeah, I don't know why. Oh, Jesus. It doesn't matter. He takes a series of breaks in which he drinks one of these punch sodas and plays a pinball machine. And initially you think nothing of it, but as the movie goes on and as mayhem is caused, the fact that he keeps to these breaks and the fact that, even once the animatronic things have come alive, he's still taking these breaks. It starts to add something intriguing and weird to his character that I can't say the movie ever completely answers, and I think that's the point. In addition to everything that's going on in the sort of Evil Dead 2 meets Meet the Feebles setup of Willy's Wonderland or Five Nights at Freddy's, although I've never heard of that computer game, but people keep referencing it online when they talk about this film. There is also a bunch of generic kids that you would find in any sort of horror slasher movie that show up to help the aforementioned girl that Jim mentioned burn the place down and get the janitor, which is what they call Nic Cage's character when referencing the movie, to try and get the janitor out of Willy's Wonderland and to burn it to the ground, which goes awry. And they're essentially there to provide cannon fodder and a little bit more kind of exploitation elements to the film outside of just Cage occasionally doing battle and lots of cleaning montages and so on. So there is some intrigue about the fact that Cage's character never speaks. There's some intrigue about there's a lot of theories online about the dog tags that are hanging from his window in the car. And there's lots of theories about why is it that he takes these meticulous breaks even when it actually doesn't make any sense because mayhem is going on, and isn't he meant to be there to stop the mayhem? So there's certainly some attempt by the script and the filmmakers to weave something into this that isn't just your normal B-movie rip-off of 80s horror type straight-to-video thing. In terms of my feelings on the movie, unless you want to go first with that, do you, Jim?
No, mate, you crack on. On.
So my feelings on the movie are exactly the opposite of Breach, in the sense that for all it's very similar to Breach in the sense that it rips off a lot of things, it's totally generic, and there's nothing in it that's particularly surprising except the aforementioned behavior of Cage and his rigorous routine of having to keep his breaks and having to go play the pinball machine. Outside of that, which is a bit unique to the movie, it's very generic and rips off tropes and things that you've seen before. However, it has a director, a lead actor, a cinematographer, an editor, and a sound engineer who genuinely cares about making it, a good-looking, well-directed, well-edited, interestingly shot B-movie. It wasn't necessarily shot in a way that I would shoot it. Certainly the fisheye lens blurry thing was a bit annoying, but it was at least a movie. All the criticisms we had about Breach was they didn't bother to light it properly. They didn't bother to cover up how cheap the sets were. They didn't bother to do any sound design, etc., etc., etc. This was a movie that, for all its generic tropes and for all its attempts at bonkers fun and not quite getting there, mainly because we've seen a lot of this kind of stuff before, but also just because it didn't really have enough ideas to carry it through its 90-minute running time. It at least had a cast and crew who knew how to light a set, knew how to do some sound effects, knew how to do a good score, and so on and so on and so forth. Like, it had the production value that meant that it looked at least better, in essence, than the sort of B-movie script and B-movie sensibility that it had. So that's my main thing. In terms of, like, did I like it? Did I enjoy it? It's kind of it's got a 5 point whatever on IMDb out of 10. And I'm like that. Yeah, it's like a 5.5 out of 10 in terms of, overall. But where I would sing its praises is it does what it's meant to do properly. And if you were, there's a lot of people who say shit like, well, you have to do remakes because there's a new generation of horror fans out there, and how are they going to discover Evil Dead if you don't remake it, or how are they going to discover Dawn of the Dead if you don't remake it? And I fundamentally disagree with that. I don't think that you need to remake anything to go back and find Evil Dead. However, let's say that new generations are not going back and finding old movies, right? What they're finding is Nic Cage and Willy's Wonderland, right? For a new generation, no, it's not anywhere near as good as Evil Dead 2, and I'm not about to say that. But for a new generation that doesn't have those frames of reference that we have, this would be something new for them. This would be something different for them. This would be something that was well made for them, and something that I think that they would get a ton of fun out of. If I'm being fair.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So that's where I come at it from.
All right. Well, I enjoyed it a lot more than that.
Okay.
I didn't enjoy it as much as The Trust, for example, but
no.
I think what I enjoyed about it most was its complete and total commitment to its ideas.
Yes.
And it didn't, like, so often, like, a promising idea just gets ditched because they can't be bothered to keep it going. Right. So the first thing is they decide, you know what, Nic Cage is going to be a tough guy and he's not going to speak. Now, any other movie, that would have, like, at a certain point, he'd have to speak to a character and he'd go, you know what, we've made our point about him not speaking, and being a tough guy and whatnot. So we can just, like, get on with a normal movie. We can get on with our generic, he's locked in a place and he's fighting some demons thing. But instead, they absolutely commit to the idea that he doesn't say a word.
Yes, like, it reaches the point where you think, you realise they're actually going to commit to this. He's not going to say a word for the whole movie. And then it stops being a thing. It's just his character. But to commit to... The other thing is, that I really, really loved about it, is it's a movie where Nic Cage... And I have my theories about what's going on here. But... and I think it's all to do with... my theories, I think it's all to do with promises. But that we can get to that. But it's a movie where Nic Cage is locked in a restaurant filled with demonic robots, but he's hired to clean the restaurant. And what I like about it is that he cleans the restaurant.
Yeah.
Like, throughout the movie. Do you know what I mean? It's not like Yeah, well, now we've got that bit out of the way where we've got our plot point of why he needs to be in the restaurant, and now he's just going to fight the robots. His main thing throughout the whole movie, his main motivation is to clean the restaurant, and all the robots do is get in the way of that.
Yeah.
Like he kills the robots, then just goes back to cleaning, and then like he spends ages cleaning the toilet. Then he gets ambushed by a gorilla, and they have a big punch up in the toilet. After he's killed the gorilla in a particularly gruesome / amusing way, after he's done, he cleans the toilet again. He cleans it all up, and every time he's killed something, he puts on a fresh T-shirt. And again, it's just total commitment to this idea. Same thing with the drink every hour or whatever it is. Again, like it's never made a plot point. It's never like at what point is he in the middle of a fight and the thing goes off, or like what if he runs out of punch, or do you know what I mean? It's never used as a vehicle for jeopardy. Do you know what I mean? Or
except when
like
he leaves,
or tension or anything.
Except when he leaves the girl.
But he leaves her. But again, all that does for me is it just underlines that his presence within the plot is like contingent on his life and how he's choosing to live it. He'll kill the robots because it's the right thing to do, and he's trying to clean the restaurant, and he can't do that if someone's trying to murder him, right? And that's about as far as it goes. He doesn't really seem to care that much. I think he cares about the dead people. I think it's interesting how he covers them at the end, and that does seem to like have a call back to the dog tags thing. But it's just all the way through the movie, and the fact that at no point do they try and disguise the fact that he's hitting rubber animatronic figures, right? They don't like double down on making them like, I don't know, CGI, or making them like that somehow the robots can change into being like flesh or bone or something more destructive. Do you know what I mean? Like I could see that happening in another movie where,
right,
for reasons that they can't be bothered to explain, in order to make the monsters more menacing and more a threat, that they would choose to momentarily turn their like friendly plastic things into something more malleable and hard and destructive. Instead, they're vaguely menacing to start with. They're like shabby rubber robots, but also in that kind of like vaguely menacing way that those things can be. And that's as menacing as they get, that kind of vague menace. So when Nic Cage is punching like a rubber alligator in the face, he is quite clearly punching a rubber alligator in the face. You know what I mean? And it's really, again, all the way through the movie, I just kept being blown away by how committed to their ideas they were. And I know what you mean about it being kind of a bit of a hodgepodge, but when you're making a B movie, like a proper B movie, it's always going to be a bit of a hodgepodge of influences and all the rest of it.
Well, but what it is,
you know what I mean? But sorry.
No. What it is it's an elevator pitch, right? On one hand, which is Nic Cage beats up animatronic, murderous animals, right? Which if you told someone that in this present climate of Nic Cage doing a series of bizarre B movies, if you say that to someone, they know and who has seen some Nic Cage films in the last 15 years, they know exactly what they're in for, right? And that appeals to a certain audience. But then the idea of a horror comedy, any horror comedy, appeals to yet another audience. And then, then there's like the third, I guess, either VOD audience who just watch anything that comes onto Amazon Prime or whatever. But in general, you've got a winner on your hands just from the concept alone, as long as you play out that concept. The elevator pitch, the get the bums in seats, is Nic Cage fighting, murderous animatronic animals, right? Or animatronic creatures in a Chuck E. Cheese type thing, right? That's your elevator pitch. That gets your bums on seats. And that's going to appeal to, our generation, because of the intrinsic, like, oh, what's Nic Cage doing next kind of question. Right. And our love of, like, weird-ass B-movies. And just the fact that so many movies are so generic these days that, we're hungry for anything that's different and out of the ordinary.
Yeah, also, right, I don't think it's not an obviously cynical cash grab.
Right.
Breach was.
And the other hope that I would have is that a younger audience discovers this movie and, you know, it becomes their, like Mandy did or like whatever, it becomes their, you know, B-movie of this year that they all kind of enjoy.
It did have kind of like a late night Channel 4 feeling to it, didn't it? Like the kind of thing that you and I and John might have watched one night, late at night on Channel 4, and it become a bit of a favourite. As you say, before we'd maybe seen other things, or even knew anything about Nic Cage, but there was a lot of it that seemed very committed and very sure of itself.
Yeah.
And it's impossible not to be like drawn to that.
And it was well made, and that will always get points from me. If you're going to go the low budget video on demand, Nic Cage is your star route. You know, the one thing I'll say about Cage is that at least all his movies look like movies. You know what I mean? They're not like Breach that look like it was filmed in a warehouse in Bratislavia or whatever. Anyway, so I'll definitely give it credit for that. And you know, if I'm going to be fair, I hope that the younger generation get out of it what we got out of, you know, our B movies back in the day. I really do. I really hope that it's a Meet the Feebles for them or whatever. I think it's difficult for me to watch it and, you know, 100% applaud it because, like I say, I've seen a ton of stuff like this before. So it's difficult to watch it with completely fresh eyes. You know, you said that it sticks to its ideas, which it does, and I appreciate that. However, I don't think it has the strength of its convictions in the sense that it wants to kind of have its cake and eat it too, in the sense that it wants to stick to its quirky ideas. It wants a quirky question mark, Nic Cage, who is he, what is he doing there, mystery, obsessive compulsive kind of thing at the core of it. But then it has too many like generic expectant tropes thrown into it because it wants to kind of say, oh, don't worry, this is just a fun bullshit movie. Like, don't overanalyze it. In fact, the writer has said in interviews, like, check your brain at the door. There's nothing intelligent going on here. Like, this is just meant to be fun and stupid. To which my response would be, well, it's not fun enough and it's not stupid enough. It seems to have an interesting idea on one side, which it commits to 75%. What it doesn't do is it doesn't commit to the fun, bonkers, stupid side enough to get away with it. Doesn't commit to the bonkers madness enough for it to get away with, well, don't worry if the intelligence doesn't come through. It's just dumb fun. It needs to be really dumb fun. Like, there's a reason why something like an Evil Dead 2, and I'm just going to keep referencing it because my brain at this point, at this time of night, cannot think of another reference right now, although there are many. But there's a reason why a Reanimator or an Evil Dead 2 or a, Halloween 4 or whatever, there's a reason why those things are what they are. And it's because they knew how to do, you know, wild, crazy, bonkers, keep the blood pouring down the wall, fun kind of thing. And this movie, while it's intriguing and has some intelligence and has this interesting character, and while Nic Cage is clearly reveling in it and doing all that he can to squeeze every last drop of fun juice from it, it's too generic in its fun for it to be truly off the wall, if that makes any sense.
I know what you mean, but I would still, to an extent, first of all, I disagree that Halloween 4 is a better movie than this, but that's just my opinion.
I'm not saying Halloween 4 is a better movie than this. I'm just saying...
You were just struggling for references. No, I do get what you mean.
Knows what it is and knows how to keep it churning.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but I feel like it's more... It seems to me more like you said, they have their elevator pitch, so they have to stick to that. I do think there is some meaning in Cage's character and what's going on.
There is, and I have a theory.
I do too. So do you want to swap? Should we swap theories?
Yeah, you go ahead. You go with.
All right, I'll go first. So my theory is.
Oh, what is Jim's theory? Let's leave this tantalizing cliffhanger hanging in the air like a cliff, because we've got a break for some adverts. I hate having to do this, but it keeps the world going round for whatever reason. So the Aftermovie Diner does not endorse any of the bollocks you're about to hear. It's all nonsensical gibberish, probably some kind of fucking Geico commercial. And while we're at it, fuck insurance companies, fuck Geico, and fuck insurance companies that think comedy sells insurance. All of it is punchable. The progressive woman, the fucking emu guy, the fucking, I'm a hot dog seller that's really selling wet teddy bears. Like, fuck off! And fuck off Geico. Anyway, there's some adverts coming up. I apologize hugely for those adverts. I hate all of them. And the Aftermovie does not endorse them. However, it does keep the Aftermovie Diner free, rather than a Patreon-only podcast, which we could do, but then only about 4 people would listen. So, here are some adverts. Put up with it. And then, what's Jim's theory? We're getting into theories. We're getting into wild speculations and theories, and it's all exciting. And yes, that after this break.
I think he's a soldier or an ex-soldier. And I think he has been betrayed. And he feels like throughout his life, he's made promises to do things that he has not been able to follow through on, right? So whether it's Afghanistan or Iraq or whatever, he's gone to those places being told this is what you're here for. And so he's made a promise by being there to, his country, promises to the army, promises to the people that he's supposed to be protecting, that he feels like he's been unable to follow through on through no fault of his own, right? That his career at this point has been one of broken promises. Right. So when he's offered the deal for me to repair your car, you need to clean the restaurant. He takes that at face value, and everything that happens to it, whether it's, satanically possessed animatronic children's toys or teenagers over their head, on a revenge mission, he has promised to clean the restaurant. And so everything that happens, and I include the energy drinks and the breaks, is how he has grooved himself, right? How he's honed himself to be the person who can best achieve those goals. So you can almost imagine him in some war zone or whatever. Once his tour is over, he goes into the game room, whatever, drinks his caffeinated drink because he doesn't get, there's no time off for sleep, and he plays the pinball machine, and then he's back out again doing whatever, right? So that's kind of the feeling I get from it, that it's about fulfilling promises when you're in a position to do so, regardless of whether those promises are ridiculous or no longer necessary or helping nobody really, or even putting people in danger. It's, I will follow through on what I promised to do, and that is how I live my life. So that's what I think.
And that's a really fair assumption. I completely see that could be a decent fan theory, and the only hole in that I have, and there's going to be a hole in every theory, so please don't take this personally, because there's holes in my theory as well. But the only hole in that I can see is that I don't believe, even if the soldier has PTSD, even if the soldier has obsessive compulsive disorder, I don't believe that a soldier would stand idly by while children were killed without doing anything.
But I feel that's transference. I feel that's transference of an idea of nobility or cinematic heroism. Whereas I think if he's served in places where he's maybe shot children, or he's seen children blown up by roadside bombs, or destroyed by drone strikes, or there's no knowing the horror that he's seen.
Right.
You know what I mean? So my argument is that he has decided that his life is, he will fulfill his promises regardless of the carnage or the mayhem or, all the reasons that that they pulled out of those places, right? That they pulled out of Iraq, that they're pulling out of Afghanistan, right? There's not as if there's not very good reasons for doing so, but the hole that it's left in his idea of how the world should work has meant that he will carry on regardless. And whatever he's seen in that restaurant, right, is presumably nothing compared to the things that he's seen in his life. But that would be my counter argument there.
Yeah. Okay. And again, I'm willing to accept, like, it's definitely written in such a way that all theories are right and all theories are wrong.
For sure.
Do you know
for
what
sure.
I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
I would go with a very similar theory, except instead of being a soldier, he may have once been a soldier, like in his human life. I'm going to say that he is either death or the devil or something like that. And I think the reason why he's behaving the way he's behaving inside the Wonderland is because, notoriously death and the devil or whatever has been depicted in fiction as making deals, right? Or, taking deals or whatever it is. And he makes a deal for his car to be fixed in order to clean the restaurant, wear the T-shirt, and take breaks. The guy says, like, don't forget to take breaks, like whatever's in the kitchen, that kind of thing. And I think that he is enacting the deal that he has made that night while collecting the souls of the people who have tricked him in the past by transubstantiating their souls through a black mass or a rite, a satanic rite or whatever, to because the bit that we didn't put in from the plot, by the way, is that the reason why the animatronic pets are evil is because years ago the place was owned by a serial killer who was utterly depraved, who hired other utterly depraved serial killers, and when the police were on their tail and coming to shut the place down, they did a satanic rite that substantiated their souls from their human bodies into these animatronic monsters. And the townspeople, realizing they couldn't do anything about it, have essentially been giving them a human sacrifice every week or every night or whatever. I don't know how often, but at least regularly. And so my idea, just because of the slight otherworldly, detached, silent, odd way, almost robotic way that Cage, because I was running it through my head the whole time through the movie. I was like, is he one of the serial killers who was like transubstantiated into like a nearby kid or something rather than being in one of the puppets? Like, is there something there? Is he, because he was so robotic and so, or was he a robot in some way? Like, I was trying to play it out. And those were my two theories. My two theories were either he was one of the psychopaths who was transferred to not one of the puppets, one of the animatronic puppets, but rather like a nearby child or something, and grew up to be Nic Cage, and then is coming back home to like fight or whatever, or come back to try and join his place maybe. And my other theory was he was like death or the devil or whatever you want to call it. So
I have to say I really like your death theory. I that stands up with the deal aspect of it. I like that. I think you're right that the very fact that it's the animatronics are possessed through a satanic ritual opens up the doors to, well, if there's satanic rituals, then there is a Satan, right. And if there's a Satan, then there are angels. There's clearly another world. There are deals to be made. Yeah, I think I like that idea of that. It throughout history, there are literary depictions of death or the devil and making deals where you have to stick to the rules. So and I forgot about that. You don't forget to take breaks and wear this T-shirt and stuff. And you're right. There's a definite. There's something there. There's something to that. So yeah, and I guess I felt like I also, again, that idea of commitment. I liked how committed they were to we're not going to explain this. We're not going to be like, if there's anything I hate more, it's like, oh, well, it's because they rubbed this magic fucking lamp and it all happened. And what we have to do to make it stop is to rub the magic lamp backwards or wearing a hat or whatever, right? And it's like, we just got to get to the magic lamp. And it's all, instead it's like, no, he just has to survive the night and clean the restaurant. Nothing's going to change throughout this movie, right? Yes, he'll be attacked by various satanically possessed robots, but he has to clean the restaurant and then he'll get his car and he'll leave, and that's all he wants. And that's, you know, the end of the movie. And even her getting into the car, because I also got, I don't know about you, I've got like a couple of From Dusk Till Dawn vibes about the whole thing, right? There was definitely From Dusk Till Dawn, and the end was very like, you know, well, not what happened with Juliette Lewis and George Clooney in that, like, she got in the car, but there is definitely, I do like the deals idea, but again, it's just a commitment to where, in some ways, we're going to go against, you know, B-movie law, and we're not going to abandon our gimmicks as soon as they, you know, get in the way of what's, you know, an easier way of telling a story or a more digestible way of telling a story. They're committed to a really unusual way of telling a story, and that harks back, I guess, to kind of 70s movies where they were, you know, more style over substance. But in a way that, I don't know, they're allowing, it's not that many films that allow Nic Cage to have fun and where that doesn't become either irritating or out of character somehow. But like the bit where he's playing the fruit machine at the whatever it is, the pinball machine at the end, and he's doing some like very small but peak Cage things. You know, like, but like from the good Cage period when he would be playing like a straight guy, but he'd do something slightly weird. Right, and very intense. That would be like, wow, no one like acts like this. And that's what he was doing. He wasn't going full Cage. It was just that kind of.
So that was all his idea. That was not in the script. The dancing while playing the pinball. The other thing that kind of made me think about the whole. There's another nice thing about the pinball and the breaks, and then the fact that kind of each fight with the monsters gets like more and more crazy or more and more difficult for him, and maybe this plays into the Five Nights at Freddy's ripoff. I don't know, because again, I only know that from seeing people write about it online. I don't know the game myself, but this idea of sort of each time he goes on a break, he has to like level up. Like he's playing a game on the pinball machine, and at one point we see him literally bust through like the million score or whatever it is. It goes all to zeros, like it's all nines, and then it goes all to zeros. And that's when he's doing the funky dancing, and he kind of goes, yeah, and whatever. And there's this idea that, that I've seen floated about. It's not just my theory, but this idea that somehow levels him up in order to be able to face the very big bad Willy the Weasel at the end, which he does have more trouble defeating than he does the other.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think again that's what I like about it, in that you know, picking and choosing of certain influences is, in my opinion, a good thing if you're bolting it to like some committed ideas and to that you know what you want to do. You know what I mean? It's like it's the difference between Baby Driver and Hot Fuzz.
Right.
You know what I mean? Where there's like lots of good ideas and lots of things pinched to make Hot Fuzz good.
Yeah.
But it's bolted to like an idea that they're very, very committed to.
Yes.
And are not going to let it go for the sake of just, you know, because it's easier. And Baby Driver is just like, here are all the things I think are cool. I'm going to put them in a movie and every single thing that happens is like the easiest way to get from A to B, because I'm not interested in that. Yeah. And it's why it was such a shockingly terrible movie. Yeah. But that's what I liked about this one, is that, it's got like, and all those things like, what if it was a bit like a video game, and, you know, or what if it's a bit like a deal with the devil, or whatever it was, works if you don't have to go all the way down that road to explain that, because you're committed to this idea of, All that matters is he cleans the restaurant. And that, I think, is what made me fall in love a little bit with the movie, was the bit where I was like, he's really going to clean the restaurant. You know what I mean? He's not just going to sit there and tell, you know what I mean? Like tell war stories in a corner to somebody on a phone. You know what I mean? Like all the easy ways they could have gone. How do we get through the night? Like he's staying the night. So what do we do? Is it like war stories? Is it talking to somebody on a phone? Is it, you know what I mean, a burgeoning relationship? Is he going to have to, you know, atone for some sin of the past? None of that. He went there to clean the restaurant, so he's going to clean the restaurant. And I just kind of fell for it a bit when it had a montage of him really getting that place nice and clean and tidy. You know, I just thought that was brilliant.
I think there was a part of your little
there was a little bit. I'm not gonna
OCD
lie.
nature where you're like, I'm finding it very pleasing.
Yeah,
that I'm seeing this place cleaned up.
Yeah,
like, I think there was a part of you that was very happy about that. I agree with you completely in principle. I think in practice, it was a little repetitive, a little slow in places, and like I've said before, a little generic. And I couldn't, you know, when I go into a Nic Cage film, especially a film where it's like Nic Cage fights, you know, animatronic monsters or whatever, you know, I kind of want it to be some sort of insanely magical experience. And this one wasn't. It was a really nice experience, and it certainly wasn't a negative experience, but it wasn't the levels of madness that I was hoping for.
But can I very quickly though, because I think this is interesting, like take you back to your first point, which is the reason because I do agree with you, I don't disagree with that. But what I think is important is that I do think it's as bonkers and unhinged and strange and you know, and odd a movie as it can be with the budget that they had. You know what I mean? And I think that unlike Heist, like you're saying, they took, not Heist, Breach. Unlike Breach, they took what they had and they took it as far as they could with the idea that they had and that commitment to that. And I agree, it wasn't as bonkers as it might have been. Just the idea itself suggests a certain otherworldly outlandishness, right? It has to work. But they don't have the money for that. Like, they've clearly just got the money for some people and some suits. Like that's all they've got. They've got a restaurant.
No, I understand what you're saying, and again, you know? I don't. You know. Anyway, that's that.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. If you're going to make that movie, you have to. If you're going to make that movie, you have to be committed either with resources or whatever to make it happen. I just feel from me watching it that anything where it was let down a bit like that, I could forgive because I felt like they were stretching what they had as far as they could.
Yeah, I'll give it that. I will give it that. I think that the interesting conversation to be had a little bit here off the back of what we talked about with Bruce Willis and Breach. I think the interesting conversation and the segue that I'll put in here to start talking more about kind of Nic Cage and his role, both as sort of a leading man in B movies, coupled with, in the case of this movie, he's also a producer on the film.
Yeah.
Some interesting facts about this movie.
Okay.
First of all, Nic Cage read the script, and one of the reasons why he's a producer on the script is that he was like, no, this is the script we're making. You're not going to come in here and change this for something else. This is the script we're making. The second decision that was Nic Cage's was because they had a line in the script at the very end when he's about to face off with Willy. There was a line for him to say that was meant to be akin to like Bruce Campbell saying, come get some or whatever, right? Just some generic line that we've heard a million times. And they did a few round robins of like trying to get the perfect line. And Nic Cage was just like, no, don't even bother. Like, we just do this movie where I don't say anything. Let me be a silent movie star. I just want to be a silent movie star, right? The third thing was Nic Cage really likes reptiles and amphibians. So 2 of the monsters that were meant to be mammals were changed to a chameleon and an alligator to appease Nic Cage.
But it did work. I preferred those monsters. The chameleon was so weird, and I loved him punching the alligator.
Right.
So I'm all for Cage's instincts on this one.
Cage was like, I have to get reptiles in here, so that's it. That's the only change he made to the script. That and removing his one line, because he's like, I don't need the one line. It's not a special enough line that it means anything. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Let me just be silent through the whole thing. And what was the other thing that Nic Cage brought to it? Oh, and the dance moves at the pinball.
Yeah.
And when you look at that, right, and when you look at the movies that he's done, and I'm not talking about all of them. I'm not talking about like schlock that he did with like Cusack about 10 years ago when Netflix was just looking for any old junk, stuff like Frozen Ground or whatever. I'm not really talking about stuff like that. I'm talking about, and it probably started with, well, to be fair, it started years ago with stuff like Vampire's Kiss and Wild at Heart and all these kind of movies that he did back in the 80s and 90s, Valley Girl and things. These movies that he picked back in the 80s when he was starting out, he did not take, he was the nephew of Francis Ford Coppola. Like, he could have taken any easy route into stardom, you know what I mean, that was offered to him. And instead he was like, no, I want to do this mad movie where some sales exec becomes a vampire or whatever. And I want to eat a live cockroach on screen. That was his pathway, you know what I mean? And I want to do, sure, I'll have my run of being a leading man in action movies, but I'm going to make sure that I'm the most cagey leading man in action movies. Nic Cage has always been an interesting leading man, even when he's doing big blockbuster movies or whether...
Yeah. I mean, that was part of his shtick, wasn't it? Like, that he stood out because he was always very slightly unusual, even when he was being straight, even in Con Air.
And when you think of him as a leading man and you think of his like key roles, whether it's Con Air, whether it's Leaving Las Vegas, whether it's Vampire's Kiss or whatever, he's just always very interesting and magnetic on screen. And what he has done, unlike a Willis and unlike a Cusack, he's realized that to go into B movies, he's realized that to continue to be a leading man, he has to go into B movies. But right. He's also realized that if he's going to go into B movies, 4 out of every 5 B movies, he's going to make them what he wants to make them. He has found a way, an enviable way, to get across in a variety of weird and wonderful scripts. I mean, you look at Mum and Dad, Mandy, this, the bunch of like hitman movies he's made. There's one where he's like fighting animals in a zoo or something, or whatever. I don't know. There's a whole bunch recently, but he's done, and every third one or whatever gets some notice and gets some credibility or gets a fan base or gets something, and that keeps the engines of his career turning over. But what's interesting is he, has found this way to continue doing performances that interest him. And because he's such a deeply weird individual, any performance that's going to interest him, or any kind of script or idea or concept that's going to interest him, is invariably at some point going to interest, an audience. And he's enough of a charismatic and magnetic leading man to carry these ideas. I think my only problem is that I kind of, like I say, and I felt this way about Mandy, I definitely felt this way about Mum and Dad, which I wanted to be so much better than it was. And there's a few other Nic Cage movies that I feel this way about. I always go in wanting that, that Nic Cage frisson, that kind of bubbling madness, that whatever. And I don't mean the put on, over-engineered, ironic laugh at whatever. I'm talking about like when Cage has a genuinely weird idea and wants to see it through to the end. And I'm always looking for kind of the magic, right? And nowadays you only kind of get glimpses of it. It's sort of like, the best way to describe it is having seen Evil Dead 1, 2 and Army of Darkness, and having seen like Bubba Hotep, and having seen Bruce Campbell playing Autolycus, King of Thieves in Xena and Hercules. Every time Bruce Campbell did a B movie, every time he did a Assault on Dome 4 or Mind Warp or Moontrap or any of these movies, you wanted that Bruce Campbell. Do you know what I mean? You wanted that, like, oh, I'm going to get a one-liner and I'm going to get a crazy face and I'm going to get some mad stunts and I'm going to get this, right? And invariably, because, the movie didn't have the budget or didn't have the script or, Bruce wasn't feeling up to it or whatever, you didn't get that every time out the gate. You had to wait for a Bubba Hotep, or you had to wait for a role that he could really sink his teeth into. And I feel that kind of way with Cage, in that sense where you get it, you get little glimmers here and there, but it's only really every 8 years or whatever that he gets that role that really allows him to cage up the joint. But I've got to applaud his efforts, that as he's gone into video on demand, leading man in B-movie abyss, that he's at least trying to do it in an interesting Cage way and not just showing up and putting his Fizzog on the poster. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'd agree with all of that. I think that's fair. I mean, I think I've enjoyed a lot of Nic Cage B movies, but I do kind of feel the same way as you, that you don't always get the Nic Cage you want. Like, I wanted Ghost Rider to be better.
Ghost Rider 2 is better.
Oh, okay, I haven't seen Ghost Rider. But I really enjoyed the one where him and Ron Perlman play knights escorting a witch through the depths of the Black Plague. And I wasn't expecting much out of that one, but I really enjoyed it.
Was that Outcast?
A really fun one. I can't remember what it was called. It might have been called Outcast.
Did it have Hayden Christensen in it?
No, I don't think so. It was him and Ron Perlman,
okay,
as a knight in like medieval Europe, transporting a witch, and it was a lot like this, in that it had a premise and it was committed to it, and everybody involved was, like, fuck it. Ron Perlman was like, fuck it, I'm here with Nic Cage, we're making a movie where we're knights, we're transporting a witch, let's go. And Nic Cage just, found a character, noble knight, struggling with, in a battle between good and evil that he feels like he can, enjoy. And that I think is the thing. It's like, how do I, like you said, how do you cage up this joint? And it's not always an easy way. You wouldn't necessarily think in The Trust that there was a way to cage up the joint, but that's like his best performance in years, I think. And so the movie he's been in for years, but it's on the surface a very straightforward, crooked cops get caught in a crooked deal movie. Like there's no like supernatural element to it. Arguably, he might be better off not being overshadowed by the ridiculousness of the plot, right? Now, I think that's what I liked about the Black Death one, in the two knights transporting a woman accused of witchcraft across a like plague-torn landscape. I'm down for that story. And then if you make one of the knights Nic Cage, I'm even more interested in that story. But it's not Nic Cage first outlandish story. It only makes sense because Nic Cage is in it, kind of a thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, completely.
So I guess that's where this one. But then that's why I liked this one, because it wasn't just leaning on Cage. If anything, he was being very, he was dialing it down, like, an extraordinary amount. He barely spoke. Well, not barely spoke. He didn't speak, but I mean, he didn't act all that much, right? There wasn't a lot of gurning. There wasn't a lot of physical stuff. He was just very centered and focused in the movie, just like his character is. Even though there's all these deeply peculiar things happening around him, the fact that he stayed quite centered in his performance. It seemed like he was very controlled. Everything he did in the movie, even when he was like getting very like losing control slightly with fighting, it still felt his performance was controlled. You felt like the when he lost control temporarily while fighting, it's because his character was losing control while fighting. You know what I mean? It felt it didn't feel like a slip of his performance, or I'm just going to go for an easy, over the top laugh here. It felt like a deliberate choice within the performance to do that thing, and the whole movie played out like that. It played out like Nic Cage made a choice and built a character and committed to it all the way through from beginning to end. And I really enjoyed that. So as a follow-up question then, if we did Willis in Breach and Cage in Willy's Wonderland, is there another B-movie actor out there who we can do, like, see what their VOD up to?
Well, what was interesting was one of the other movies that I talked about maybe wanting to cover was Russell Crowe in Unhinged, which I actually watched right after Willy's Wonderland last night. And and weirdly, to tie it in with the whole Cage thing, was that there was an article I found on the movie Unhinged where, I think it was on the AV Club, where they literally went, like, Russell, don't go the route of Nic Cage, right? Because Unhinged was a weird one, and we certainly don't have time to get into it now, but it was just interesting that there was this article that was saying about Russell Crowe, like, don't go this road of sort of trying to do these sort of weird sort of genre B movies, while at the same time constantly saying in the article, Russell Crowe is so far from being a leading man anymore that, I guess this is what he has to do. And what was interesting about the article is exactly what I kind of said about Nic Cage. Is Nic Cage realized that at an age where he could then make his own path. But you're right, when you have these guys like a Cusack or whatever, or Willis, who are just like, well, I guess I have to be in B movies now because Hollywood recycles their leading men seemingly about every 8 years now. I mean,
yeah, that's true.
Chris Pine and Chris Hemsworth will all be too old to be leading men in the next 5 years by Hollywood standard, not by our standard. By the days of you being able to be Sean Connery and still be a leading man into your 60s and 70s, it just doesn't exist anymore. You know what I mean? Even Kevin Costner has had to go find miniseries and movies made for TV to go do. Even and there are very few people who have been able to, in the last 20 years, sustain a career where even as unless you're a character actor, no leading man is having this kind of longevity unless you go into B movies. In terms of other people who have done it, it's actually interesting to see that particularly when I think of like weird B movies, not when I just think of B movies, but when I think of weird B movies, the two names that weirdly come to mind is the Harry Potter guy, who seemingly realized, well, I'm never going to be Tom Hiddleston or whatever, so I might as well go off and do like weird indie stuff. He did like Horns and Guns Akimbo and a bunch of like weird little B movies. There's him. There's guys like we did that Vampires in the Arctic movie with Lawrence Fishburne in it. Like Fishburne kind of went off and did. Fishburne is on occasion, yeah, for sure. Slater's done a little bit. You'd have to find those guys who were big in the 80s and 90s. That's really who you have to kind of go find as to who's doing them now. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know who it would necessarily be, I guess. I would have to stumble across it and be like... and this isn't the first generation to do it either. You saw people like Tom Berenger and stuff have to do it. Like they went from being that's true. Leading men in a couple of movies in Hollywood to then suddenly having to be, rubbery faced and weird in the Sniper 8 or whatever.
Guy Pearce does a few weird ones. I've always had a soft spot for Pearce.
So there's no real way to end this podcast. So here's a track from my new album, Splang, which is available on Bandcamp, Spotify, Deezer, iTunes, Google, all the places. Splang! Here's a track. Splang! Enjoy. Splang!
What's in the future?